Hello, and welcome to For Book Lovers Only, where we interview talented authors and talk about great books. My name is Rob Brown. I'm your host and chief book lover, and today we have a very special guest. I'm particularly excited about our guest today because she is a fellow Michigan State Spartan, the way I am. She is a criminologist and an author of the book Dear Diary. Please welcome to the show, Dr. L.J. Samuel. Dr. Samuel, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
Absolutely, and you know I'd already mentioned that you're a Michigan State Spartan, so Spartans are always welcome on the show. No
Awesome.
offense to you Wolverines out there, but really happy to have you here. So, I'm particularly interested in the fact that you're a criminologist. I've always been fascinated by that career. What
Right.
made you go into criminology?
That's interesting. I think I've always had a love or an interest in the overall criminal justice system. And when I was in high school, I actually had an internship with the police department and just really fell in love with the policing procedures. So with criminology, you could do a myriad of things, but policing was really my choice. So I kind of tailored my academic career to criminology. So really kind of like the study, the science of crime, and then looking and focusing on the police.
Okay, so is criminology, does it focus more on the science aspect, or is it more the psychological aspect, or is it kind of a combination of both?
It is a combination. So it's a very broad field. So, you would have the science, for example, like forensic science would be part of, criminology. You're looking at, why people commit crimes, for example, and then you look at the systems itself. So the systems within the criminal justice system, police, corrections, courts. So it's very broad.
Okay, and when you went to state, did you know right off the bat that you wanted to be a criminologist, or?
I knew right off the bat that I wanted to have more education, so with the graduate degrees. Originally, I thought I was going to be an FBI agent. That was the original plan, but things changed once I went to grad school.
Okay, and what type of courses does someone who is interested in criminology, what type of courses do they take other than basic criminal justice? Are there other courses on the periphery that they can take?
Absolutely. So again, because you're really looking at the science and studying crime, so there are a lot of stats classes that you take, that you need to take, research classes, just again, in terms of like studying overall crime. And then again, you can get a little more specific in your concentration, police classes, classes on juvenile justice, classes on the court system, things of that nature. And then again, you want to kind of mesh that with other fields. So history, is very important, just the foundations, just kind of what's going on in society at that time, why these types of systems are in place.
Okay, and when you got your bachelor's, did you immediately go into a doctorate program, or did you work for a couple of years and say, hey, I really want to get the doctorate?
So I think I was almost like a professional student for a little while. So I got my bachelor's, I got a master's in social justice studies, then went to Michigan State to get a master's of science, and then I was working on my thesis, and I came to DC for a little bit to collect some data and to write, went back to Michigan, and then applied to grad school, and I got a full ride from Howard University, go HU.
Excellent.
And so that's how I ended up in DC.
Okay, and you worked for the DC Police Department?
Correct, yes.
I know you probably got a million stories.
And that's kind of how the book came
Right.
about. But yeah. So actually, when I first started working for the department, I was in homicide. And my area, one of my areas is homicide, but specifically retaliation homicide. So looking at those types of relationships in disadvantaged communities. So that's what I did for a number of years. And then again, my interest is really policing and policing systems and looking at relationships between the police and the community. So more so looking at misconduct, discipline, and how to improve those systems to better relationships between the community and the police. So I then moved over to internal affairs, and I was there for a number of years.
I see. So I'm really intrigued. So part of your expertise is the relationship between the community and policing. So obviously, I know you have some strong opinions about Ferguson, Missouri, Baltimore, Chicago. Can you share a few of those opinions?
Sure. What's interesting is that I actually started a blog, a crime and justice blog, after we started seeing a lot of these incidents come out in the media. And it's not necessarily that there are more of these incidents. I think it's just with the advent of technology and social media, the information is more readily available, which means that we can have these conversations sooner. as opposed to say, we're going to get a conference together, we're going to get a meeting together. We can have like real-time conversations after these incidents. So I did comment a lot on it, but again, it's kind of like nothing has changed. It's the same thing. So what are we going to do? Because clearly, a lot of the programming that's in place is not working, and there has to be an acknowledgement, really, from the police, from the community, from some governmental systems that, one, it's not working, and I think it all comes down to respect. And I think you've heard this over and over and over again, but it's so basic. It's really, really basic that if you work in the community and you're invested in the community and you care about these people, there's certain behaviors you're just not going to engage in.
So when you were in the Internal Affairs Department of the Metropolitan Police Department,
Yes.
Washington, D.C., obviously I know you saw a lot of cases of police misconduct. Are those isolated incidents, or is that much more rampant than the average person on the street would even suspect?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not isolated, but of course, we have a broad spectrum of behaviors. So I actually ran a program that oversaw all the misconduct in the department, civilians, police officers, and I always said it's from the janitor all the way up to the chief of police. So you would see some of your routine type of behaviors, what we call AWOL, so absent without leave, somebody just not showing up to work, for example, just not following that protocol, a lot of car accidents, a lot of DUIs, things of that nature. Then these types of behaviors would escalate. So you would see a lot of the lower grade, I guess, type incidents or discipline actions throughout the department, but it was the patterns that I was really looking for. So if you have an AWOL and maybe an accident, then kind of what's next. And we actually had a very unique program where we had a point system. So we would assign points to certain types of incidents, and of course, the more serious, the more points you get. And then, you would have certain triggers and things that would have to be done.
And when you talk to, let's say, your counterparts in different cities, I imagine that you did, you may have talked to your counterparts in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. Did you see like the same types of issues that they were dealing with that you were dealing with in Washington, D.C., or is it different regions, different issues?
I think when you're looking at bigger cities like that, very, very similar. And I think the driving force behind a lot of what we did was Department of Justice. So they would do these pattern or practice investigations with these, tended to be larger departments, especially when there was an outcry from the community. But the behaviors were very similar, very similar. And again, it's just that, police officers come from the community, so they're a subset of the community. And if the behavior is not addressed early, just like with a child, and I hate to just compare like, an adult to a child, but really we are all overgrown children, right? Yeah. If it's not addressed early, meaning even like in the academy, then as they stay on the department longer and get away with things, it just escalates. It really does.
I see. So you left the Internal Affairs Department of the Metropolitan Police Department, and then where was your next stop?
So I actually started my own consulting firm. So I started a firm called Samuel Consulting, LLC, and I do criminal justice consulting. And one of the things, of course, looking at policing. And in addition to that, really looking at domestic violence. I found that whenever I would write a piece on my blog about domestic violence, and it wasn't planned, it was normally something spontaneous, I would have a really good response and would have a lot of people that I did not know coming forward and telling me their stories. And I realized that it was just a safe place for them. And then even the book, and I know we'll talk about that, has a domestic violence homicide. So it kind of coincides. So one of the things that I do with the firm is, workshops on domestic violence, self-defense classes specifically for women so they can reduce their victimization. And then one thing that I'm trying to do is work with the area universities to see if we can reduce some of the dating violence that's currently occurring on campuses.
So obviously you have a very impressive experience and expertise in criminology. You have your doctorate. what made you decide to kind of take all that and write a book?
What's so interesting is that it wasn't intentional at first. I think beyond everything, I think I'm still an academic. I just like to write. I like to write for fun, and I always journaled. And I just wrote this story, and I just thought it was just a fun story, and I just gave it to a friend, and I was like, oh, I'll read this. And she really liked it, and she said, you should try and get this published. And I never thought about it because I felt like a lot of what I wrote was mine, and it was personal. And oh, what if, what is somebody gonna think of this,
Right.
So that was hard letting go. So once I kind of got over that hump, I kind of tried to figure out what was the best way to get this published, and I did self-publish it. But it was an important story, and I feel like one of the main reasons why I wanted to put it out is that I love to read. I love to consume crime fiction. I really like crime fiction, obviously, and mysteries. But I found that a lot of the times that the authors did not put the extra work in terms of just doing the research, especially when they are writing in DC about, for example, where's the Washington Monument? Maybe they would mention the wrong street or
Right.
the wrong quadrant.
That drives me crazy and stuff like that.
Right. And I just thought it's so simple. And then when it comes to procedure, police procedure, all you have to do is Google it. But I'm coming from a place of experience, so I thought that was important. So I thought, you know what, here's an opportunity for an authentic voice to be a part of this field.
That's great. So tell us more about Dear Diary. I'm interested in learning more.
So Dear Diary is a murder mystery set in Washington, D.C. And as I mentioned before, it is has a domestic violence homicide. So really it kind of tells a story of murder at the hands of the person that you love and that you think should love you the most. The victim is a female. And the protagonist, the detective, is a female.
And what's her name?
Her name is Samantha Harris.
Samantha Harris.
Samantha Harris, yeah. Samantha's bad, She's beautiful, she's strong, she's smart, but she's flawed. And I think that's what's interesting about it, and I think that's what people really take to and latch on to. But the interesting thing about the story is that their lives, the life of the victim and Samantha, the person that's trying to solve this homicide, they parallel somewhat. And so you see some interesting things as Samantha is going through the story and trying to solve this homicide.
Now, did you use your own personal experience about like specific cases and kind of say, I remember this case back in this year, I'll take a little bit of that. In this case,
I did. So it is a work of fiction, but I kind of dug back in the mind in terms of, things I've read and seen and worked on, yes.
So tell me more about kind of like the mechanics of the book. I mean, as far as you using your criminology degree, I mean, is there like a lot of language in the book that like a layperson would be like, hey, I don't really know what that means, or do you kind of spell it out for the reader?
I do spell it out, but I think with all the crime stories that are now on TV, some of them are accurate, some of them are not. I always say that it would be really nice to have a crime, find the person that did it, arrest them, indict them, and try them all in like 48 minutes. It's like amazing, but it takes a little bit more time, obviously. But I think because we are just, knowledgeable as a society now, just in terms of what's available on the internet, a layperson can understand. But I am very descriptive in the book.
I see. And when you look at like different television shows, CSI, NCIS, Law and Order, do you say, that's so far-fetched? You're like, oh, I've actually experienced that in my professional life too. I've seen cases like that.
I think generally, I think it's far-fetched.
Far-fetched.
And a lot of times, you laugh. Some of the programs were a little more accurate. I think of like NYPD Blue in terms of like the behaviors of the police officers and the things that they have to go to, because you're in big cities. These are like really serious crimes, and sometimes you don't always follow procedure.
Right.
Especially when you think of maybe a child is missing, or it's a serial killer. Things of that nature. But yeah, they do make me laugh, but they're entertaining.
They're entertaining, yeah.
And that's the point. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. So you had mentioned earlier that Detective Samantha Harris.
Yes.
You said she's flawed. Now, is that something that, once again, is that something that you've seen from maybe a detective that you've worked with in the past and say, you know what, that would kind of make for a good characteristic for this character, or is it?
I don't think it was necessarily based on a detective that I know. I think it's just the admission that we are all flawed.
Right.
And that even though you can be in a really powerful position and have, some really important work to do, that, we all bring things with us. And
Right.
it's just a matter of like how you work through that.
Right.
And how does that impact, your work? And maybe it can impact the work in a really good way, because maybe you're going to be a little more detailed just
Right.
based on your past experiences.
And what made you decide to self-publish your book?
Well, originally, again, because I wasn't even going to publish
Right.
it, so I kind of was really thinking, how do I do this quickly? And what I wanted to see was maybe if I can get a good response, that maybe someday I can get a publisher, something a little more formal, for the second book. So I just researched the process and saw that Amazon has this platform called CreateSpace,
Right,
which I'm sure
CreateSpace.
you're familiar with, where people can self-publish. And I think, again, we are shifting in society where you don't necessarily have to rely on those formal measures. There's this whole group of, artists that are just doing their thing and not necessarily dealing with these, formal measures. So, I consider myself an indie author. You know what I mean? Nobody discovered me.
Right. You discovered yourself.
I really did. I really discovered something about me, and it's now become a passion. But I really thought for the first book that this was a good way for me to learn the industry, learn a lot about myself, and really navigate and figure out the process and what I need to do for the next time.
That sounds amazing, and I applaud you.
Thank you.
For self-publishing your first book. And I'm interested as to what the reception was from your book, from both laypersons and from law enforcement personnel. Like, what did people think about the book?
Well, I think I'm really happy with the response, because what I normally hear is that we can't wait for the second book. So I think people really seem to like the characters, and to the point where, I love this person and I can't stand this person. I think I did my job when you have those strong emotions.
Right, exactly.
Just reading the story. And because, most of the people I tend to deal with are in law enforcement, those are my friends. They like it too. Yeah, it's been a really good response. And I think, like I said earlier, in terms of the domestic violence piece, I think either for victims or people that, we all know somebody,
Right.
if you want to admit it or not, that has been victimized, by domestic violence. So I think it made people, think a different way. There are some tips through the story in terms of how to deal with domestic violence. So I think, again, with that response. So, I've got people at the gym that love it, ladies in their 70s. My niece, who's a teenager, loved it. So, yeah, I've had a really
very
good
diverse
response.
audience.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier that people are like, we can't wait for the second book. So is this the first in a series?
Great question. So, because of the response, I decided to turn it into a series. So, we now have the Samantha Harris crime series. And it's interesting. Why I did that is because I said, gosh, she's still speaking to me. She still has things to say and things to do. So I'm currently working on the second book, and it should be done soon. Really just perfecting the writing and making sure it's perfect. I am a perfectionist. But it's called Going...
You're a Spartan, of course.
Right, exactly. So it's called Going Rogue. And it's a continuation of Dear Diary. You can still read it and enjoy it and, kind of catch up. But I think it's nice in terms of reading the series to read Dear Diary first, and then when Going Rogue comes out, to read that second.
Okay. And do you have like a set number, like I want to do 5 Samantha Harris novels, or you just want to kind of keep going until you can't go anymore?
I did set a number. I said a minimum of 3. And I think the max would be 5, but who knows? There's more might kind of pour out, and we'll see. Or maybe I'll get some big publisher that will want me to do 12. I don't know.
Could happen.
Yeah.
Could happen. So for our viewers who are interested in learning more about you and more about Samantha Harris, where can they go?
I have a website. You can find information on me and on the on the book at www.ljsamuel.com. I'll say it one more time, www.ljsamuel.com. Of course, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. So my Twitter handle is @crimedoc1213. You can find information about me, the issues that are near and dear to my heart, and then information about the book and just upcoming projects. I've been doing some short stories, op-ed pieces, especially on domestic violence. So you can find a lot of information there.
Great. LJ, thank you so much for stopping
you.
by. We're
Absolutely.
really excited about Dear Diary. We're even more excited about Going Rogue. So when that comes out, be sure to stop by and visit us again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for stopping by for Book Lovers Only. If you want to learn more about Dr. Samuel and her book, Dear Diary, please visit www.forbookloversonly.com. You can also get on our mailing list while you're there. Be sure to also visit www.villageconnector.com and join the village. Thank you once again for joining us on For Book Lovers Only. My name is Rob Brown, your host and chief book lover. Join us next time. We'll have another great author and another great book. And until next time, if you love books, we have a home for you. Take care.